It starts with a small cut, something that should sting, something that should make you wince. But instead of acknowledging it, instead of taking care of the wound, you hear yourself utter words that have become your reflex. It's nothing. Others have it worse. I'm fine. And in that moment, something deep happens beneath your consciousness. You have just reinforced the belief that what hurts you isn't valid enough to deserve attention. This is the silent psychology of people who minimize their own suffering. They are not humble. They are not strong. They are protecting themselves from a truth they learned long ago, that their pain was once too disturbing for someone else to carry. Let me ask you a question that might feel uncomfortable. When was the last time you allowed yourself to feel the full weight of what hurt you? When was the last time you didn't immediately compare your struggle to someone else's to decide that yours didn't count? Because here's what most people don't understand about minimization. It's not a conscious choice. It's a survival pattern that began to form years before you knew it had a name. Maybe you were 7 years old, crying over something that seemed enormous to your little heart, and someone who should have carried that pain with you, looked at you and said, "Stop being dramatic. You're too sensitive." Or maybe no one said anything at all. Maybe they simply looked away. Maybe they changed the subject. Maybe they felt uncomfortable with your tears and you learned something devastating, that your emotions made people uncomfortable. So you adapted. You learned to shrink your pain to a size that wouldn't bother anyone. You learned to say, "I'm fine," when everything inside you screamed that you weren't okay. And now, years later, even when you are alone, even when there is no one to perform for, you still can't afford to feel it fully. Psychologists call this emotional invalidation, but that clinical term doesn't capture the silent tragedy of it all. Because what you're really doing is abandoning yourself. You are doing to your own heart what was done to you long ago. Every time you say, "It's not that bad," you are telling the wounded part of you that it still doesn't matter. Every time you move on without acknowledging what you carry, you confirm the belief that your suffering is too heavy a burden for anyone, including yourself, to bear. And the cruelest part? The world often rewards this behavior. People praise you for being so strong, so resilient, so low maintenance. They don't see the cost. They don't see how you slowly disappear under the weight of a pain you won't allow yourself to name. There is a reason you do this. Understanding that reason is the first step toward breaking free. Because minimization is not random. It is a learned response to environments where vulnerability felt dangerous. Children who grow up in homes where emotions are rejected learn that feelings are problems to manage, not experiences to honor. They watch the adults around them brush feelings aside, ignore them, suppress them, and they internalize a devastating message. Pain is weakness, and weakness is something to hide. But sometimes it's even more subtle than that. Sometimes you grew up in a home where someone else's pain was so strong, so consuming, there was no room left for yours. Maybe a parent struggled, was ill, depressed, or overwhelmed. And you, without anyone ever explicitly saying so, learned that your needs came second. So you became the easy child, the one who never complained, the one who could handle things alone. And that identity, once necessary for survival, has become the prison you still live in today. Because when you minimize your pain, you're not simply being selfless. You are reliving the moment when you first learned that your suffering wasn't important enough to take up space. The psychology behind this goes even deeper than childhood patterns. It connects to something fundamental about how humans process pain and meaning. When you minimize your suffering, you try to control the narrative of your own life. If you can convince yourself it wasn't that bad, then you don't have to mourn what you lost. You don't have to feel the rage of what was done to you. You don't have to sit with the uncomfortable truth that you deserved better than what you got. Minimization becomes a shield against grief, but that shield comes at a cost. Because what you refuse to feel doesn't disappear, it just goes underground, surfacing as numbness, as exhaustion, as a silent depression you can't quite name. Trauma psychology research confirms this. Studies show that people who constantly invalidate their own emotions experience higher rates of anxiety, depression, and chronic stress. Their body keeps the score even when their mind refuses to acknowledge the pain. Your nervous system doesn't lie. When you tell yourself, "I'm fine," while your heart races and your chest feels tight, your body knows the truth. And this disconnect between what you say and what you feel creates a sort of internal fracture. You split into two. The version that performs being okay for the world, and the version drowning beneath the surface. And the wider that gap becomes, the harder it is to remember who you really are. There is something particularly devastating about how minimizers talk about their past. And they do it with a casual shrug. But if you listen carefully, if you pay attention to the pauses between their words, you can hear the unprocessed grief. You can feel the weight they still carry. Because minimization doesn't heal wounds, it just makes them invisible. And here's what makes this pattern so hard to break. Minimization looks like strength. It looks like resilience. It feels like you are mature, rational, able to take a step back. But real strength is not denying pain. It's having the courage to feel it fully. The strongest thing you can do is not to move on. It's to stop, acknowledge what hurts, and say aloud, "This matters. What I went through matters. I didn't deserve that." But for many people, those words feel impossible to say. You have to confront the grief for lost time, for relationships that failed because you couldn't let anyone see your wounds. That confrontation is terrifying. You keep comparing yourself to people who have it worse. You keep telling yourself you should be grateful, you should be stronger, you should have gotten over it by now. But pain doesn't follow a schedule, and suffering is not a competition where only the worst stories deserve recognition. Because you felt it. Because it shaped who you have become. There is a psychological concept called comparative suffering, and it's one of the most harmful thought patterns people engage in. It's the belief that your pain only matters if it measures up to someone else's. But that logic is absurd. Would you tell someone with a broken arm not to complain because someone else has a broken leg? Would you tell someone who lost a parent that their grief doesn't count because someone else lost both parents? But you do this to yourself all the time. Every time you think others have it worse, you engage in a form of emotional self-harm. You take your own suffering and use it as proof of your unworthiness. You say that unless your pain is the worst pain, it doesn't deserve attention. But pain is not a hierarchy, it's not a contest. And the person who has it worse than you likely also minimizes their own experience, comparing themselves to someone else, convinced that their suffering doesn't matter either. This is how entire generations of people learn to suffer in silence. Each person quietly convinced that their pain isn't bad enough to deserve care. Each person waiting for a permission that will never come. And the tragedy is, this pattern doesn't only affect you, because when you can't acknowledge your own pain, you struggle to hold space for others' pain as well. Minimizers often become fixers. They can't sit with discomfort, their own or someone else's. So they rush to solve, to minimize, to move on. They mean well, but what people often need is not solutions. It's to be witnessed. It's someone who can say, "That sounds really hard," without immediately adding, "At least," is the language of minimization. At least you're healthy. At least you have a job. At least it wasn't worse. When it's used to dismiss rather than comfort, it becomes another way of saying, "Your feelings are too heavy for me to handle." So you learn to handle them yourself. You learn to be the one who needs nothing, the one who is always fine, the one who can take care of everyone because you convinced yourself you don't have needs worth tending to. But needs don't disappear when you ignore them. They accumulate. They turn into resentment, burnout, into a deep fatigue that no amount of rest seems to fix. Because you're not just tired of doing too much. You're tired of pretending you're not tired. You're exhausted from carrying a pain you won't allow yourself to put down. Let's talk about what happens in the body when you chronically minimize your emotions. Because this is not just a psychological problem. It's a physiological problem. Your body responds to emotional suppression the same way it responds to physical threat. When you push down feelings, your nervous system records this suppression as stress. Your cortisol levels rise. Your immune system weakens. Your body stays in a low-grade activated state, waiting for a release that never comes. Studies in psychoneuroimmunology have shown that people who habitually suppress their emotions have higher rates of inflammation, cardiovascular problems, and chronic pain. Their body literally carries the pain they won't allow themselves to feel emotionally. That tension in your shoulders, that tightness in your chest, that fatigue that doesn't lift no matter how much you sleep. This is how your body says, "I'm still carrying what you won't acknowledge." And here's what's particularly insidious about minimization. It doesn't only affect your relationship with your own pain, it affects how you perceive reality itself. When you constantly invalidate your emotions, you begin to doubt your own perceptions. You question your instincts. You wonder if you are too sensitive. You question the validity of your feelings. And this self-doubt makes you vulnerable to people who will take advantage of it, because when you don't trust your own pain, you are more likely to accept treatment that hurts you. You are more likely to stay in situations that damage you. You are more likely to let people cross boundaries because you convinced yourself you are overreacting. Gaslighting works so effectively on minimizers because they are already gaslighting themselves. Someone tells them, "It wasn't a big deal, you're dramatic," and instead of defending their reality, they agree. It's the voice they use on themselves every day. This is how minimization becomes a form of self-betrayal. Every time you reject your own feelings, you take the side of the people who hurt you against yourself. You do their work for them, convincing yourself you don't deserve care. And the saddest part is that you probably learned this from people who were minimizers too. From parents who never learned to recognize their own pain, who pass down the belief that suffering in silence is noble. From a culture that celebrates productivity over presence, that tells you to move on rather than take a break. We live in a world with no patience for pain, that wants you to heal quickly, quietly, without making anyone uncomfortable. And so you learn to cry in private, to struggle invisibly, to keep your wounds carefully hidden behind a smile. But what if you didn't have to do that anymore? What if you could stop abandoning yourself? What if you could learn to hold your own pain with the same compassion you extend to everyone else? This is not self-indulgence, it's survival. Because you can't heal what you won't acknowledge, you can't release what you won't allow yourself to feel, and you can't fully love yourself if you constantly tell yourself your suffering doesn't matter. The path to healing begins with one uncomfortable truth. Not because it's the worst pain, not because someone validated it, not because it meets an arbitrary threshold of severity. It matters because you felt it. But believing this, truly believing it, requires you to question every message you've internalized about what makes suffering worthy of recognition. It requires you to face the grief of all the times your pain was rejected, including by yourself. This grief is heavy. It's the accumulated weight of every "I'm fine" you said when you weren't fine. Every time you swallowed your tears because someone else's needs seemed more important. Every moment you fell silent to keep the peace. And when you finally allow yourself to feel that weight, when you stop minimizing long enough to acknowledge what you've carried, something opens up. Not destructively, liberatingly. Because the truth is, you have been strong for so long, too long. And the strength that never rests, never admits exhaustion, never asks for help is not strength at all. It's survival mode disguised as resilience. Real resilience includes vulnerability. It includes the ability to say, "This is hard for me." It includes the courage to drop the armor and admit you're hurting not because you are weak, but because you are human. So here's what I want you to consider. What would it look like to stop comparing your pain to others? To stop using their suffering as proof that yours doesn't matter? What would it look like to simply say, "I struggle," without immediately qualifying it with, "but I shouldn't"? This would probably feel uncomfortable at first. Strange. Because you have spent so long minimizing, that honesty looks like indulgence. But that discomfort is just the unknown. It is your nervous system adapting to a new way of being. And with practice, with repetition, with the gentle insistence that your feelings deserve space, something begins to change. You start to notice when you minimize. You catch yourself in the middle of a "I'm fine," and you pause. You ask yourself, "Am I really okay? Or is this just what I learned to say?" This pause is everything. This moment of honest self-inquiry is where healing begins. Because you cannot change a pattern you do not notice. But once you see it, once you recognize the ways you have let yourself down, you can choose differently. You can choose to validate your own experience before anyone else does. You can choose to soothe your wounds with the same care you give to others. You can choose to stop waiting for permission to acknowledge that yes, what you went through hurt. Yes, it still affects you. Yes, it matters. And here is what is beautiful about this choice. When you stop minimizing your own pain, you create space for others to do the same. Your honesty gives them permission to be honest. Your vulnerability invites theirs, because the people in your life don't need you to be fine all the time. They need you to be real. And being real includes the messy and uncomfortable truth that sometimes you are not okay. Sometimes you need support, Admitting this doesn't make you a burden. It makes you human. And the people who truly love you, those worth keeping in your life, will be grateful for the opportunity to carry your pain as you have carried theirs. But even if no one else validates your pain, even if you are surrounded by people who still minimize, you can validate yourself. You can be the person who finally says, "What I went through was hard. I didn't deserve that. I have the right to still be affected by it." This statement is not self-pity. It is honesty with yourself. It is the beginning of breaking a pattern that kept you small, that kept you silent, that kept you from fully inhabiting your own life. Because when you minimize your pain, you don't just diminish your suffering. That your needs are negotiable, that your presence is only acceptable when it's convenient for others. But you are not here to be convenient. You are here to be whole. And wholeness includes the parts of you that suffer, the parts that have never healed, the parts that still carry wounds from years ago. These parts don't need to be fixed or erased or minimized. They need to be acknowledged. They need you to stop treating them like inconveniences and start treating them for what they are. So if you are someone who has spent years minimizing, who has learned to smile through pain and to push past exhaustion, who convinced themselves that their suffering doesn't matter, I want you to hear this clearly. Your pain is real. It is valid. It deserves to be acknowledged. You don't have to earn the right to feel what you feel. You don't have to justify your struggles by comparing them to someone else's. You have the right to suffer, even if someone else suffers more. And more than that, you deserve to heal. Not by pushing through, not by pretending you're fine, but by finally admitting, gently, courageously, the truth. That what you went through affected you, that you still carry wounds you never allowed yourself to heal. This is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is the beginning of treating yourself with the kindness you have always freely given to others. This is what it looks like to stop abandoning yourself and start coming home. Because minimizing is a form of homelessness. It is living outside your own experience, always at a distance from your own heart. Back to your body, back to your feelings, back to the truth of what you survived. This journey is not easy. It requires you to feel things you've spent years avoiding. It requires you to cry losses you never allowed yourself to mourn. It requires you to face anger, sadness, betrayal that you carefully kept hidden beneath a veneer of being okay. But on the other side of this grieving lies something you've been seeking your whole life. Peace. Not the fragile peace based on performing that you're fine, but the deep, rooted peace of finally being honest with yourself about what hurts. This peace doesn't mean the pain goes away. It means you are no longer at war with yourself over whether you are allowed to feel it. It means you can hold your suffering gently instead of pushing it away. It means you can finally rest. And maybe that is what you needed all along. Not to be stronger, not to be tougher, not to minimize more effectively, but to finally give yourself, after all these years, permission to be exactly as hurt as you are. To stop abandoning yourself in the name of strength. Because the truth is, you have been strong enough. You have carried enough weight for long enough. And now, if you're ready, you can set it down. Not all at once, not perfectly, but slowly, gently, one honest moment at a time. You can start to say, "It's hard," without immediately following it with, "But I'm fine." You can start to treat your pain like it matters because it does. And in those small, brave moments of honesty, you will begin to remember something you forgot a long time ago. That you don't have to earn the right to take up space. That your feelings don't need to be justified to be valid. That you matter, not because of what you do or how much you can endure, but simply because you exist. This is the truth that minimizing has kept you from seeing. That your presence, your pain, your entire complicated human experience deserves care. Not someday, not when you have suffered enough to deserve it, but now. So stop waiting for permission. Stop comparing your wounds to others. Stop telling yourself it wasn't that bad when every part of you knows it was. And start, finally, gently, treating yourself like someone who deserves care. Because you do. You always have. And maybe, just maybe, it's time you start believing it too. There is something deeply transformative that happens when you finally stop minimizing. It's not a sudden change. not a dramatic epiphany. It's more subtle than that. It's a slow thawing of parts of you that have been frozen for years. You begin to notice things you used to ignore. How your body tightens when someone raises their voice. How you apologize for things that aren't your fault. How you stay silent when you have something to say. And instead of dismissing them as you always did, you start to ask yourself why. Why do I do this? Where does this pattern come from? What am I trying to protect myself from? These questions aren't comfortable. They require you to look back, to revisit moments you'd rather forget. But it is in this willingness to look, to really see what happened, that healing begins, because minimizing thrives on avoidance. It counts on you not looking too closely, not sitting too long with the truth of your own experience. It counts on you moving forward, pushing through, pretending. But when you stop, when you finally allow yourself to be still with your pain, something remarkable happens. You realize you can bear it. And slowly, very slowly, you begin to rebuild your relationship with yourself. You learn to hold yourself with compassion instead of judgment. This process is not linear. There will be days when you fall back into old patterns, when you minimize automatically, when you tell yourself you're too sensitive. And that is normal. Healing is not a straight line. It is a spiral, revisiting the same wounds from different angles until they finally start to close. What matters is that you keep coming back, that you keep choosing honesty over avoidance, that you keep reminding yourself that your pain matters, even when the world tells you otherwise, because the world will keep telling you to minimize. It will keep rewarding stoicism and punishing vulnerability. It will keep glorifying those who never complain, who never ask for help, who can handle everything alone. But you now know the truth. You know that this apparent strength often hides a deep wound, that behind every "I'm fine" sometimes hides an "I'm not okay, but I don't know how to say it." That forced independence is not autonomy, but isolation. And armed with this knowledge, you can start making different choices. You can begin building a life where your pain has room to exist, where your needs matter, where your voice can be heard. This might mean setting boundaries with people who minimize your experience. It might mean seeking help, whether from a therapist, a support group, or a trusted friend. It might mean learning to say no, to ask for what you need, to take space when you need it. These are not acts of weakness. They are acts of rebellion against a system that taught you to put yourself last. They are acts of self-love in a world that profits from your neglect of yourself. And yes, it will be uncomfortable. Yes, some people won't understand. Yes, you will feel guilty, selfish, demanding, because that is what you were taught to feel when you put yourself first. But this guilt is not the truth. It's just the echo of old voices, old patterns, old beliefs that no longer serve you. And with time, with practice, with the gentle insistence that you deserve better, those voices fade. They are replaced by something softer. A voice that says, you are enough, that your needs matter, that your pain deserves to be cared for, that you don't have to earn the right to be treated kindly. This voice has always been there. You just buried it under years of minimizing, self-neglect, believing you didn't deserve better. But it has always been there, waiting for you to listen. So listen. That knows your pain matters, that knows you are not too much, not too sensitive, not dramatic. You are just human, and being human means feeling deeply, being hurt sometimes, needing connection and support. There is no shame in that. There is no weakness in admitting that life has been hard, that you carry wounds, that you need help to heal. There is only honesty, and honesty, uncomfortable though it may be, is the only path to true healing. So be honest. With yourself first, then with others. Tell the truth about what you feel, what you need, what hurt you. Stop waiting for someone else to give you permission. Give yourself permission, permission to feel, permission to heal, permission to take all the time you need, permission to be imperfect, to be in process, to still be figuring things out. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to be healed to deserve care. You deserve care now. In the middle of the mess, in the middle of the pain, in the middle of not knowing how to move forward. And maybe that is the most important lesson of all. that you don't have to wait to be fixed to be worthy of love. You are worthy now. You always have been. Minimizing just made you forget, but you remember now. You remember that your pain matters, that your needs matter, that you matter, and armed with this memory, you can begin to build a life that honors it. A life where you don't have to pretend to be okay when you're not. A life where you can ask for help without shame. A life where your vulnerability is welcomed, not rejected. A life where you are finally, fully, completely yourself. This life is possible. It begins with one courageous decision: to stop minimizing your pain and start honoring it. To stop abandoning yourself and start coming back. To stop pretending and start feeling. It is an act of rebellion. It is an act of love. So start today. Start now. Start by sitting with yourself and asking, how do I really feel? And whatever the answer is, don't minimize it. Don't dismiss it. Don't compare it. Just hold it. Acknowledge it. Honor it. Because it is yours. Because it is real. Because it matters. And in this simple but profound act of self-recognition, you will begin to heal, not by erasing the pain, but by finally giving it the space it has always deserved. You deserve it. You always have. And it's time you finally believe it. Because your pain is not your enemy. It is not something to fight or suppress or minimize until it disappears. It is a messenger. It is trying to tell you something important about what you need, about what you're missing, about what has to change. And when you finally listen to this message, when you stop silencing it and start truly hearing it, that pain, when it is acknowledged and held with compassion, transforms. It becomes wisdom. It becomes strength. It becomes the foundation of a more authentic, honest, whole life. This is the paradox of minimizing. By trying to avoid pain, you prolong it. By refusing to feel it, you give it power over you. But when you finally turn around and face it, when you say, I see you, I acknowledge that you are here, it begins to lose its grip. Because unacknowledged pain is a wound that never heals. It infects, poisons, spreads into every part of your life. But acknowledged, validated, cared for pain can heal. It leaves scars, yes, but scars are proof of healing. They are proof that you survived, and you survived. Through everything you went through all the pain you minimized, through all the times you told yourself it wasn't that bad, you survived. But survival is not enough. You deserve more than just survival. You deserve to thrive. You deserve to live fully, to feel deeply, to exist without apologizing for the space you take up. And it starts by stopping minimizing, by stopping telling yourself your pain doesn't matter, by stopping convincing yourself you should be stronger, better, more resilient. You are already strong enough. You are already resilient enough. What you need now is not more strength to endure the pain. It is the courage to feel it, to acknowledge it, to finally let it pass through you and let go. Because that is true healing. Not avoidance, not suppression, not minimizing, but passage. Allowing the pain to move through you, to transform you instead of defining you. And when you do this, when you finally stop resisting and start allowing, something changes. The pain doesn't necessarily disappear, but your relationship with it changes. It no longer controls you. It no longer defines you. It becomes simply part of your story, not the whole story. This is the freedom you seek, not freedom from pain, because pain is part of the human experience. Freedom to acknowledge it without being overwhelmed by it. And that freedom begins today. Not tomorrow, not when you are stronger, not when circumstances are different. Today, now, in this very moment, all you have to do is sit with yourself, with your pain, with your truth, and say, I see you. You matter. You deserve to be acknowledged. That's it. It's the first step. And it's the most important. Because in this simple act of recognition, you begin to undo years of conditioning. You begin to rewrite the story you told yourself for so long. And slowly, one day at a time, one moment at a time, you will begin to believe a new truth. Not that your pain doesn't matter, but that it does, that it always has, and that you, with all your pain and all your wounds and all your imperfect beauty, you matter too. You have always mattered, and it's finally time you knew it.